And we're live. Hey guys, happy Thursday, and thanks for attending yet another Tracked live stream. We're so excited that you're here, and we really hope that you have a good time and that you learn some really interesting things. So, my name is Jeffrey Chen. I am an incoming freshman at Princeton University. Well, actually not this year, but next year because I'm taking a gap year. But I just graduated from Burlingame High School, which was a really nice experience for me going through high school and getting to learn all the things that kids get to learn in high school. Some of my interests include filmmaking and singing and stand-up comedy, which is why I have a camera there and a microphone there. And a lot of the times in high school, I found myself combining my love of filmmaking and stand-up comedy and singing together, as well as some science, and that really brought me here to Tracked and what I'm here to talk to you guys about. So before I begin with what this live stream is going to be all about, which I'm sure you guys already know, I just wanted to let you guys know about what you're probably going to need for this live stream. So like other live streams, we're going to be playing a Kahoot, so you might want to have another device on standby so that you can play the game and hopefully win. If you haven't checked out my if you haven't checked out my pathway already, that's okay. But if you have, you'll already have some knowledge about the moon landings, which is what I'm going to be talking about. And number 3, you're going to want to bring any questions that you have for me or about me or the pathway. And that moves us nicely into what you'll get from this live. Because if you are subscribed to Tracked, you'll get 50 XP points for being on here, which is really exciting. And for every single question that you ask, you actually get an extra 10 XP points. So by asking questions, you both benefit yourself and you benefit us, which is really great. Hopefully, you'll also get some knowledge about the moon landings, which to me is super exciting. The moon landing is something that inspired me ever since I was like a little kid, and I hope it inspires you guys as well. And finally, maybe you'll get some inspiration for what you want to do with your life or stuff that you want to pursue in your future. I know, as I said before, the moon landings were very inspiring for me, and that's what drove me to pursue my interests in communicating about science and physics. And that's really what this track is all about. So, like I said before, today's pathway or live stream is about my pathway, how we got to the moon. And so in my how we got to the moon pathway, I talked a lot about the technology surrounding how we got to the moon. Most specifically, the Saturn V rocket, which you can see over here, which is by far the most powerful rocket that humanity has ever made in all of human history. And then I also talked about the Apollo missions, the famous missions that got the first people to the moon. And most specifically, I talked about Apollo 11, which is the mission that landed Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon, and that won the space race for America. So a lot of times when I was in school and whenever the teacher would talk about the moon landing, so basically any like historical event, people would always ask, why learn about this? You know, why learn about the moon landing? And I think that's like a really good question, because it does seem sometimes a little weird to learn about something that happened so long ago, like before any of us were really born and before a lot of our parents were born. But I think we can chalk the learning about the moon landings down to three things. And that begins first with history. The moon landings were not only an event where America landed on the moon and was like, oh, great, yeah, now we get to go home. It actually won the space race for America. And for you guys who don't know what the space race was, it was basically this conflict between the United States of America and Soviet Russia. And they were trying to see who could get to space first. And so Soviet Russia actually won the beginning of the space race by getting to space first. And so America was like, well, we can actually win the whole space race if we land a man on the moon. And so they actually did. And this really set America up as a superpower in the world and changed the course of technology and science forever. If you also look, you can also look at the space race as a story about collaboration. A lot of times when we focus on the space race, for instance, watching a movie about it, we usually focus on the scientists. We usually focus on the astronauts of the mission. For example, we all probably know like some famous astronauts out there like Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin. But when we look at the astronauts, we're really only seeing like such a small picture of what the entire mission was all about. The missions included thousands of scientists, politicians who were advocating for funding this, citizens who are pitching in and bringing in extra resources to help out. So it really shapes a grand narrative of how many people were required to make this moon landing happen. So that's why when we look at the space race, it's important to look at it not only as astronauts landing on the moon, but really like the best of humanity coming together to put people on the moon. And finally, why learn about the space race? Well, it tells us a lot about the story of science and technology, just like how this Apollo 11 was a story about history and collaboration. It also tells us about the advancements of science and technology. The space race is actually what created the NASA program, which is the famous space program that some of you guys might have heard about. And when NASA was created in like the 1950s and 1960s, they actually brought the world a lot of technological achievements and a lot of new technology that was not only related to getting to the moon. For instance, the GPS systems that you use on your phones now to get from one place to another was actually developed using the satellites that NASA created during the Cold War. And so that's really interesting. And of course, like we talked about before, the technology surrounding the Saturn V rocket, the most powerful rocket ever made by humans, is becoming more and more relevant nowadays when we are starting to think about maybe returning to the moon or even going further. So that's about it for a little rundown about the space race and my pathway about Apollo 11. So I'm going to pitch you guys a question right here. And the question is, what does landing on the moon say about humanity? Now, don't worry if you haven't went over the pathway yet, or if you don't have much knowledge about this. You can make an educated guess or just write a couple sentences about what you feel like. But if you have looked through the pathway or you've known a little bit about this subject in the past, write a short response on how landing on the moon, like what it says about the human experience. And we're going to give you guys 2 to 3 minutes. And at the very end of this live stream, we here at Tract are going to pick our favorite response from the comments section. And then we are going to read it aloud for everyone to hear. So really make those responses count. Okay, so while I'm sure you guys are really busy writing down your amazing responses, and we here at Tract are so excited to read them. It's really exciting to see what you guys put out there. We're also going to transition into the Kahoot, which is, my opinion, the most exciting part about this pathway. So if you can open on another device, kahoot.it, and and you can also keep writing your questions. Your responses to the question. Don't feel rushed. I'm going to read out the code very shortly, and then I'm looking forward to seeing you guys join. Okay, so the Kahoot.it code is 1697389. Well, that's a very lucky set of numbers. I'm very proud of that code. It's very cool. Just gonna wait for you guys to roll in. Oh, hello, Mahir. Cloper. I hope that I'm pronouncing your name right. Welcome. You guys are the first two. That's really exciting. Very, very cool. I remember back in elementary school when Kahoot was first created, it was like the greatest thing of all time because, you know, back in my day, we actually had to, we had this game where we had to like slam a bell as hard as we could if we had the question. And it was just really noisy. And then now with Kahoot, it's basically limitless. Like this is like the peak of human achievement, Kahoot right here. Like we're seeing the future. Like this is really exciting. I should make my next pathway in Kahoot, to be honest. Yeah. All right, hello Ryan and Ali and Rhapsody and Rayhan. Welcome. It's really cool to see you guys here on this Kahoot. And the Kahoot is going to be about the moon landing, in case you guys haven't got the gist. But yeah, it's going to be really exciting. We're going to learn a lot of new things together, and hopefully out of this, we'll see a couple winners from it. That'll be really cool. Carl the Cat, love the name. Thanks for joining. Hello, Randy. Welcome back. You know, it's really interesting how the moon landings happen. Oh, we're starting. We're beginning 3, 2, 1. So the first question is, it's a multi-select question, which is extra special. Why did the space race happen? So we have A, it was an arms race. Both nations didn't want the other to have weapons in space. B, it was political. Both nations wanted to prove that they were the best. C, it was for fun. It would be funny to send humans and cute animals to space. And D, exploration. Both nations had people who wanted to explore space. Remember, more than one answer might be right, and if you could actually choose more than one answer. Or at least that's what I heard you could do. All right, we have 2 answers then. So on to rolling. I'm interested in seeing what you guys picked. 3. Let's go. 4. Okay. This is gonna be awesome. With only 10 seconds left. Is there anyone else who wants to answer to this question? Why did the space race happen? Going once, going twice, and sold. Okay, so yes, you guys actually got all the answers right. The answers were A, B, and D. So the space race was part of the Cold War, where the Soviet, Russia, and America were trying to see who was a better superpower. So they also, one part of being who the better superpower is having better weapons. So America and Soviet Russia were really scared that the other nation would have weapons in space. So that was a primary reason why the space race happened, because they were trying to basically send stuff into space and prove that they can put weapons in space, and thus they are the most powerful nation on Earth. It's also political thing. It's also happened for political reasons, obviously, because both countries wanted to prove they were the best. So they wanted to send the first man into space or the first man on the moon. Unfortunately, it is not just to send humans and cute animals into space. I was really disappointed when I found that wasn't the case, but it just isn't. And finally, it was done also for exploration, because while a lot of the reasons for the space race were done to show which country is the best, each nation had a group of scientists and engineers who were really just interested in exploring what's out there. And so they got to explore what's out there. All right, moving on to the next question. Oh, Cloper is in first place with 2,331 points. Good job, everyone. Everyone's just doing a great job. I'm really excited. All right, now we're moving on to question 2. Who won the space race? A, the United States of America, or B, Soviet Russia? All right, we got 3 answers, 4, 5, 6. 6 answers pouring in. Very cool. 7 answers. Yeah, if you guys want to know actually some fun facts about the space race, Soviet Russia actually sent the first living, I think the first living animal into space, that being a dog. And yeah, back to the question. So the answer was the United States of America, and I can see why some of you guys chose Soviet Russia, because in the beginning of the space race, the Soviets were actually winning. They launched the first man into space, and so America was really scared, and they needed to basically one-up the Soviet Union, so they decided to land a man on the moon. They actually succeeded, and they thus won the space race. Moving on. Okay, got some changes in the leaderboard. Cloper is still at the top, but here, good job climbing, and Rayhan is coming in hot. Can't wait to see how this works out. All right, question number 3. Who was the first man of space? Is it A, Neil Armstrong from the United States of America, B, Yuri Gagarin from the USSR, C, Alan Shepard Jr. from the United States of America, or D, Valentina Tereshkova from the USSR? Make your choices carefully. All right, we got 7 responses. 7 responses, not bad. Always thought it'd be really weird to go to space, you know, but that's something that's on my bucket list of one day I want to go to space, whether that means I'm an astronaut or someone flings me from my catapult into orbit. You know, you can't pick and choose. I just got to get there somehow. All right. Oh yeah, so the first man in space was actually Yuri Gagarin from the USSR. And so he was the first man in space, and he was what really kicked off the space race for the Americans. Neil Armstrong, I can see why you guys chose him, was actually the first man on the moon. Alan Shepard Jr. was the first American in space, and Valentina Tereshkova was the first woman in space. So these are all very, very distinguished astronauts, and they all deserve our respect. Moving on. Cloper is still in first, maintaining his lead. Randy's climbing the ranks, and Rayhan is hanging in there. Good job, everyone. All right, question 4 of 9. We're almost halfway there. What was the name of the rockets that launched the Apollo missions? A, the V rockets, B, the Jupiter rockets, C, the Saturn rockets, or D, LEGO rockets? And like I said before, this particular rocket was the most powerful rocket ever made to this day. Hopefully not for long, though. I don't know what Elon Musk is doing. Got 5 responses and 30 seconds left. 6 responses. Seven responses. 8. 10 seconds left. Anybody less? Gotta pick up the pace, you know? All right, yes. So the name of the rockets that launched the Apollo missions were the Saturn rocket series. The V rockets were never a thing. The Jupiter rockets, Sounds like a cool name, but unfortunately, it wasn't never a thing. And Lego rockets, just like my parents told me, actually can't make it to space, which is unfortunate. But good job, everyone. Next question. Wow, Cloper is on fire. Good job, everyone. And Randy is coming in second place. All right, we're more than halfway there. What was the result of Apollo 1? Now, this was the first Apollo mission to launch. It was not Apollo 11, it was Apollo 1. So A, a successful mission proved that it was very easy to get to the moon. B, a failure. A launch rehearsal resulted in the death of the crew. Or C, nothing. Launch went smoothly, but nothing was learned. Have 6 answers in. That's a very nice photo of the astronauts, like they're doing the power pose, which looks really cool. Gosh, it would be really cool to be an astronaut, in my opinion. All right, 3, 2, 1. Okay, yeah. So unfortunately, the Apollo 1 was a failure. They were meant to reach orbit and actually test the capabilities of the Saturn V rocket. But unfortunately, during the launch rehearsal, an oxygen tank caught fire and resulted in the death of the crew. And this really showed everyone in the world, and especially people at NASA, how dangerous it would be to get to the moon, and how difficult it would be. Cloper is hanging in there, first place. Can anyone catch up? I don't know. All right, true or false? All 3 of the crew on Apollo 11 stepped foot on the moon. A being true, B being false. One answer. Five answers. And right here, we also see an astronaut in the cockpit of the Apollo 11. It was a very tight squeeze in there. Like all 3 of them had to be packed in there like sardines. I'm not sure how they dealt with that. I can't even handle being packed in my parents in a hotel room for more than a day. So I don't know how they did that. Oh, we have 8 answers to this question with 15 seconds left to go. Anyone want to take a stab at it? 8. Okay, yes. The answer was false. And this actually goes back to the image of the astronaut inside that capsule. His name was Michael Collins, and he was the 3rd member of the Apollo 11 missions. And fun fact, and you can look this up, and I won't go into details, but he was actually the loneliest man in the universe, because when he was orbiting around the moon by himself, for a brief moment, he lost all communication with Earth, making him the farthest person to ever have been away from the Earth. So that's a really cool story if you want to look that up. All right, Cloper maintaining the lead as usual. And Rayhan, Jackson, Randy, Mahir, great job, everyone. Keep it up. Question 7. What did Neil Armstrong say when he stepped on the moon? A, holy smokes, I'm on the moon. B, I need to use a bathroom. C, that's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. Or D, humanity will realize achievement we have made today. Fun fact, that's actually not a picture of Neil Armstrong. That's actually a picture of Buzz Aldrin, because Neil Armstrong was carrying the camera. And yes, as much as I'd like to think that holy smokes, I'm on the moon is the first thing that he said, it wasn't. You guys all know the famous saying, so good job. And our final question. Ooh, Jackson taking second place. Good job. Our final question is, true or false? All Apollo missions after Apollo 11 resulted in astronauts landing on the moon. And my bad, it's not the final question, it's the second to last question. 5, 6. And here's a little hint if you guys haven't answered yet. That's actually a picture of Apollo 13. So if you know that story, it might help you answer this question. Yes, it was false. The Apollo 13 was the only Apollo mission after Apollo 11 to not make it to the moon due to a complication, which was basically an explosion that happened in space. But luckily, everyone made it back to Earth, so it ended up being okay. All right, Cloper is in the lead. I don't think anyone can catch up, but Jackson and Rayhan in second and third place respectively. Good job, you guys. And our last question, this time for real. What is the name of NASA's new manned missions to the moon set for as early as 2024? Is it A, the Apollo missions, B, the Artemis missions, or C, the Saturn missions? Five answers. $30 seconds left. Anyone else want to answer? Six. Suzanne. Yes, so it was the Artemis missions. Artemis, fun fact, is the Greek god of the moon, so it makes sense why we would name the next missions to the moon the Artemis missions. Also, the first woman in space, the first woman to land on the moon is scheduled for those missions, which I think is really, really cool. And now let's look at the podium and see who won this game of Kahoot. So, in number 3, we have with 6,004 points, Randy. Congratulations, Randy. Great job. Second place, Jackson. And first place, can anyone guess who it is? Cloper. Congratulations. You guys, very impressive. When I was your age, I was definitely not doing this. I was probably sleeping. So very impressive, you guys. Very proud of you. Okay, so thank you guys so much for joining in the Kahoot. Now we're going to go into the Q&A session of this live stream. And so in the Q&A session, you can just type any questions you have for me about me or about the path or about anything in particular, and I will do my best to answer them, and you can do that right in the YouTube chat. So you guys can start on that right now. But while you guys are typing the questions or the questions for me, we actually had some pre-questions that I'm going to go through right now. So Ryan asked, and he asked a really good question. His question was, what type of cameras did they use in the first moon landing, and how long did it take to get to the moon? So this is a question I actually had to look up, and it's a really interesting answer. So they actually used a Hasselblad 500C, which is a Swedish camera, and they brought it with them on Apollo 11. And so they had to actually like modify the camera so that it would be like space worthy. So they had to make it like way less and all these other things. And in the end, Neil Armstrong was actually the one who was like carrying the camera while they were on the moon. So that's why we have so many pictures of Buzz Aldrin, but not that many of Neil Armstrong on the moon. And it took them around 3 days to get to the moon. So it's a pretty long trip. Rhapsody asks, how do you get to be an astronaut? And how do you get picked to go to the moon? Who do you get to be with when you're on the moon? So currently, you actually have to have a master's degree in some STEM field, like engineering. And you have to spend at least 1,000 hours flying like a jet. Or you have 2 years of professional training in your like master's degree program. So it's some pretty high qualifications. After that, you actually have to go through a bunch of interviews, and if you manage to be lucky enough to go through those interviews, you go through astronaut training, and that's how you become an astronaut. How do you get picked to go to the moon? I don't know. Currently, I feel like it's going to be the best of the best astronauts. But back then, in the 1960s with the Apollo missions, they actually chose astronauts based on mostly piloting experiences, like in the Navy. Neil Armstrong was in the Navy, and with other factors, just like that. So I'm getting some questions in the chat, which I'm going to answer right now. Thank you for asking the questions. Rayhan asks, what caused the explosion of Apollo 13? Thanks, that's actually a really good question. So I'm not 100% sure on these details. I'm still a little iffy on it, but feel free to research this afterwards and learn more about it. But from what I remember, during Apollo 13, when they were actually nearing the moon, so they were actually in space and they were going towards the moon, an oxygen tank, it's not always oxygen tanks, malfunctioned and caused an explosion. And so they actually had to find a way to make it back home. And this brings us nicely into our next question. Stefan asks from Cloper, how did they save the astronauts on Apollo 13? The way they save the astronauts on Apollo 13 is actually a really, really interesting story. And what happened was the people at NASA developed this, like they had to come up with this plan on the fly. And what they used was, since the propulsion system on Apollo 13 was now damaged, they actually had to change some of the other systems to act as a propulsion system. So they didn't go to the moon, they went straight back around and went back to Earth, and they managed to land there, which is really exciting. And it also made a lot of cool movies, and Apollo 13 is where we get that saying, Mission Houston, we have a problem. So that's another fun fact for you guys. Now, Alec asks, did you ever want to be an astronaut? Yes, I'm sure a lot of kids have dreams of being an astronaut, and I was definitely one of those kids. So when I was little, I visited a planetarium and I saw like a little movie on the moon landings, and I wanted to be one of those people. But then I discovered that it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of physical strength and a lot of other things to get to the moon. And I decided maybe being an astronaut wasn't for me, but I might want to go to space one day. Who knows? It's still up in the air. And then Jackson asks, what's the percentage of successful flights versus failed flights? That's a really good question, Jackson. And so I'm only going to be really focusing on the manned missions here, because when there have been accidents with rockets that didn't have people in them, and they're technically failures, but I think it's better that they don't have people in them. But I'd say most flights were successful throughout human history, but there are disasters that happen where the people on board spacecraft died. For instance, the Challenger rocket explosion a while back, or Apollo 1, for instance. But most flights usually have a lot of preparation and a lot of training on the astronaut side. So most of them actually happen to go pretty well. And we'll probably see more of this, more successful missions, hopefully by 2024, when we try to return back to the moon. Okay. Yeah, thank you guys so much for your questions. Now I'm going to read the response, my favorite response to your guys' answer to the question, what does landing on the moon say about humanity? And so we had a hard time choosing a response, but our favorite response was from Rayhan, who says that anything is possible, and us humans can reach for the moon, but if we don't make it, we will be among the stars. That is some great wisdom, Rayhan. I feel like my friend has told me that many times, and it's a great quote. So thank you for sending this to us. And again, thank you guys for joining this Track Live, and I would like to use this opportunity to remind you guys that there is another Track Live coming up next Tuesday by Track's very own Vienna, who will be talking about how to write and dine like a food critic. I went over the path. It's really amazing. Since I'm also a foodie, it's really interesting, and I hope you guys show up for that one. And I hope you guys also enjoyed this one. It was really fun to do this with you guys, and if you haven't already, make sure you check out my path. I spent a lot of time on it, and I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope you guys enjoy this live stream. But thank you so much for attending, and we will see you next time. Bye.